there, and thanks for joining us. This presentation is a county-wide collaboration led by the Trauma-Informed Coordinator for McHenry County with the help of several local experts in the field of psychology and education. This video presentation will provide a solid foundation of research and evidence-based theories, as well as some practical application of the material. In order to help us gain insight into how we can bring skills learned into our school buildings, we have partnered with local behavior coaches from our elementary and middle school districts. These are the individuals who champion our children on a daily basis and strive to conceptualize the whole child. You will hear from them throughout as we take time to pause, reflect, and call to action. We will now begin exploring what it means to have a trauma-informed approach within our schools. In order to set the tone for our time together, let's first take a moment to practice being present and engaged in this learning process.
I'm going to guide you through a practice called Breathe It Out. So I invite you to settle in a comfortable sit spot with a straight spine and your shoulders back. Sometimes we can feel overwhelmed with all the thoughts, emotions, and sensations going on in our bodies. Rather than holding on to this discomfort, we have the power to release whatever is not helping us through our breath. First, we are going to release any sensations that aren't serving us. Notice where you are holding any tension in your body, or perhaps where you are experiencing numbness. Take a deep breath in, connecting to those sensations. Exhale and set that tension free, letting it go. Let's do this 2 more times. Deep breath in, connecting to your sensations. Exhale and set that tension free, letting it go. Again, with a deep breath in, and release that tension as you exhale. Next, we're going to release any emotions that aren't helping us. Connect to those feelings within you. Take a deep breath in, connecting to those emotions. Exhale and set those feelings free, letting them go. Let's do this 2 more times. Let's seal this practice with something I like to call 3 collective breaths. I invite you to practice this strategy in your day's work when you are feeling tension and overwhelmed. Breathe in deep through your nose, filling your belly with air. Exhale as you release tension. Inhale as you breathe in calming thoughts and feelings. Exhale as you feel tension release. 1 more inhale. And 1 more exhale of tension release. We shall begin.
The objectives for this training are to understand the impact of trauma on student learning and behavior, to recognize signs of trauma in students and respond with empathy and sensitivity, to develop strategies to create a safe and supportive classroom environment for all students, including those who have experienced trauma, to learn trauma-informed teaching techniques to promote resilience and foster positive relationships with students, to explore self-care practices to prevent burnout and compassion fatigue when working with traumatized students, to incorporate trauma-informed principles into lesson planning and classroom management strategies, to utilize trauma-sensitive language and communication techniques to support students' emotional regulation and academic success, and to reflect on personal biases and assumptions related to trauma, and develop a more inclusive and understanding approach to teaching. We often think of trauma as PTSD, as a catastrophic or horrific event which occurs in someone's life and changes them dramatically. These tragedies occur too often. At the same time, there are events in all of our lives which shape our views of the world and of ourselves. Much too often, they create feelings of stress and fear, which change the way we react to people, events, and environments. A trauma-informed approach has the potential to create environments and interactions which are clearly benign and which help ease those of us who have been exposed to chronic stress, fear, and trauma. We will learn about developmental trauma, which affects many of the children in our schools, how common this is, what it looks like, and how we can interact with these children and with each other in ways to enhance the learning experience and enrich each of our lives in the process.
Our experiences during our early years actually affect how we think, feel, and behave. Adverse and traumatic childhood experiences can derail development, which is why it is important for schools to be trauma-informed. Adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, are sadly pretty common in our society. ACEs take various different forms, including abuse, neglect, domestic violence, and difficulties stemming from mental illness and drug and alcohol abuse in the family. ACEs are more prevalent in children from disadvantaged and under-resourced communities, and discrimination can add to the stress and hardship for some. Not all forms of adversity are traumatic, but many do cause harm. In the most severe and long-lasting cases of adversity, a child's psychosocial functioning can be inhibited. Among other things, this can impact their ability to form and maintain relationships throughout their lives. Schools can provide the perfect setting to promote resilience and lessen the effects of adversity, but for some children, experiences in school pose a whole other set of emotional challenges. Traumatized children can have difficulty regulating emotions, staying on task, and relating with others, which can prompt bullying from peers and harsh discipline from teachers. This treatment can add even more stress for children and can lead them to question their safety and develop mistrust in authority figures. This can be particularly impactful if those authority figures lack awareness in how trauma affects cognition and behavior, or if they are being limited by their own implicit biases, emotional challenges, or exhaustion. Efforts are underway to change how schools serve vulnerable and traumatized children. To do this, it's important to identify which programs are responsive to diverse student populations and which are most effective and sustainable. Our research shows that school-based trauma-responsive programs use a number of whole-child and systems-oriented approaches. These approaches provide safe, nurturing, and supportive learning environments and therapeutic interventions when they are needed. They may also work to increase knowledge of trauma in school professionals, parents, and community providers. To become trauma-informed, schools must ensure that all students feel safe, respected, valued, and meaningfully engaged. Teachers and other school professionals must be able to identify symptoms of trauma and know their own biases and triggers to minimize the risk of traumatization. Social-emotional skills must be incorporated into classrooms to promote resilience and effective communication, and school professionals must establish and reinforce clear expectations for behavior. These core components can also be applied to other settings, such as child welfare and juvenile justice, to develop a broad and bold transformation of our child-serving systems.
Once we begin to understand why we act as we act and think as we think, self-hatred and internal stigma lose their grip on us. Once we begin to understand why others act as they act and think as they think, compassion and empathy replace condemnation. This is how a trauma-informed lens changes us. This is the main tenet of a trauma-informed approach, that beneath every behavior is a feeling, and beneath each feeling is a need. If we can meet that need, rather than focus on the behavior, we begin to deal with the cause and not the symptom. We can make a difference.
As a psychologist, one of the most important questions that I'm always wondering is, what is the function of a behavior? Not only do I ponder this for the children and families that I work with, but I consider this for myself as well. An integral aspect of becoming a trauma-informed organization is gaining insight into our own behaviors and how we, the adults who care for children, navigate the world.
Being a working parent is not easy. I myself have 2 small children who I get ready every morning and off to school before I start my own workday, just like so many of us. So some mornings are rainbows and sunshine and go smoothly without a hitch, and other mornings are like thunderstorms that catch me off guard and alter my mood. Maybe they didn't get a good night's sleep and now they're crabby. They want to stay home and play versus going to school. They have show and tell and cannot decide what to bring. Or I'm getting stressed because they have a special event that requires me to pack extra things in their backpack. Any of these factors can make for a stressful start to the day. Once we finally get in the car and I drop them off, I now only have a 3-minute drive until I walk into my next job as a teacher. Sometimes 3 minutes is not enough time for me to decompress from all the events that unfolded that morning, so what can I do? I don't want to be late for work, because that just adds more stress. So, what do? I walk into the building, but when I enter my room, I keep the lights off and close the door behind me to make it less likely for anyone to come and try to have conversations with me. Not because I don't like chatting, but because I am not ready for that yet. I turn on some music that I enjoy, which is usually Pink, and sit for a minute to get myself calm and refocus my mind. Once that happens, my lights go on and I open my door because now I am calm and ready to focus my full attention on my workday ahead.
Precipitating factors are more commonly known as triggers. We each experience triggers in a lot of different ways, but we aren't alone. Our students have triggers as well. The more trauma the student or we have had, the more difficult it is to avoid behaviors based on those triggers.
We've each had experiences that changed us, that changed the way we look at the world. The transformative experience of a trauma-informed approach begins here with each of us. Dr. Nadine Burke Harris was the first Surgeon General of the state of California. We'll hear more about her during this presentation. Thomas Rutledge, a professor in residence in the Department of Psychiatry at UC San Diego, writes that modernity has exposed us to a problem that our ancestors and evolutionary biology rarely encountered: chronic stress. Instead of the historically normal process of hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis activation, followed by rest and recovery, modern traumas and stressful events frequently result in a fight or flight response that may be sustained for days, weeks, or even months. Next, we'll hear from Dr. Isaiah Pickens, a licensed clinical psychologist and writer.
Hi, I'm Dr. Isaiah Pickens, and I am excited to talk to you about what a trauma-informed approach is. A trauma-informed approach at the heart is a way to deal with the invisible injuries that we don't see, but impact the way that we deal with the world, keep ourselves safe, and eventually heal. And a system that is trauma-informed allows us to be able to recognize when those invisible injuries like abuse or neglect have impacted somebody, and then to respond in a way that helps them heal. Not only heal themselves, but eventually heal the community. And this healing will really allow them to be able to contribute in ways that otherwise they wouldn't be able to because of that deep wound and that injury. Now, the reason why trauma-informed practice is so important is because trauma is not an excuse for behavior, it's an explanation for it. And here's why that's important. How we explain things dictate how we handle them, how we deal with them. And so when we talk about a trauma-informed approach, we're talking about understanding what's at the heart of what might make someone feel so angry that they become aggressive, or feel so withdrawn from the world that they're not coming to work or taking care of their family. And if we understand the heart of that, then we're able to provide and respond real services and real help and really real social connections that allow them to re-engage with the world in their fullest self. And this fullest self means that they're able to be the parents that they were meant to be. They're able to be the co-workers that they're meant to be, the students, the workers. All of these pieces are part of our life. Because if there's one thing I want you to take from what trauma-informed practice does, is it allows people who have been harmed and injured in ways that many times they have not had any role in. It helps them reach their full potential. And I guarantee when they're able to reach their full potential and contribute to the world in meaningful ways, we're better people for it, and so is our society.
When we encounter someone with a broken arm or leg, we recognize the impairment and will often offer to help them open a door or carry a package. When someone appears angry or out of control, we often react in kind. Someone with a history of trauma may be dysregulated. Kindness and understanding are likely to be more helpful in resolving the situation and allowing the person to be seen, heard, and valued. We all need to be seen, heard, and valued. You may be the only person a child encounters willing to provide them with these human needs.
We just learned that trauma is often invisible. What are some specific strategies we can use in the educational setting to make sure that our students are connected to us?
Everyone wants to feel seen, heard, and valued. When a child carries trauma, this is especially important. So many of our students are struggling with some form of trauma, and their behaviors are communicating to us as educators that they need support. In the busyness of home life, family life, and school life, students sometimes need to slow down and spend time connecting with someone. Spending time one-on-one with a student playing a game, eating lunch, or just talking builds a connection and helps that student feel valued. Incorporating opportunities for the students to share things with each other or with you as the teacher, either through morning meeting, a classroom circle, or a social snack time, provides them the chance to be heard and also builds upon that relationship. Students long to feel included and loved. Building activities and opportunities for this to happen in our classrooms can accomplish this feeling.
When a child comes to school and we ask him or her to sit still, share, and cooperate, there can be a painful disconnect. The child will have to be taught the skills required to succeed in this context, just as we would train a person from a more benevolent path how to conduct themselves in a chaotic and dangerous environment. Think of how much effort we put into training soldiers into becoming soldiers, and how little effort we put into training soldiers to become civilians after their tour of duty is complete.
Today, I really wanted to think about what's the best way to teach teachers about trauma without getting them distracted with all the technical stuff, and what's the most important thing for them to understand and learn. And I thought that the best way to do it might be to just make a difference between a learning brain versus a brain in survival mode. So we'll just call it learning brain versus survival brain. And this is the difference. So learning brain is this brain that's open to learning new information, and it's completely okay with ambiguity and grays and vagueness, and it sees the big picture. It like pulls back and is on the balcony, can look over the forest and figure out what's going on. On an emotional level, people in learning brain feel calm, peaceful, maybe a little excited about what they're about to learn, maybe a little playful and having fun too, and definitely curious. And they're not afraid of making mistakes because it's just part of the learning process. And so they're not really thinking about themselves. And they actually feel a little bit of confidence that if they just apply themselves, they might pick up what they're trying to learn. Now, survival brain, on the other hand, is completely different. It's hyper-focused on threat. It doesn't like ambiguity. It wants clear, hard facts. It thinks in black and white terms. It doesn't want anything to be gray at all. And then emotionally, you can imagine that survival brain makes people feel panicky, feel like a little obsessive and afraid of getting things wrong. And they don't feel calm and open to learning new things. They just want to get things over with. And people in survival brain also really don't like making mistakes, and they are afraid of looking stupid too. So students in survival brain don't want to be picked on. They don't want to raise their hand and ask questions and look stupid. And so these people are also filled with doubt about their own ability to learn stuff, and they're afraid that other people can see how stupid they really are. Now, it's really important to understand how learning brain and survival brain interact, because survival brain always trumps learning brain. And it makes sense, because survival brain is just trying to save your life. And so if it thinks that there's something dangerous happening, you better pay attention to it, right? But the tricky thing is that as survival brain stays on longer and longer, it's harder to get out of that. And it's harder to really go into learning brain. And the way I think about it is kind of like the myth of Sisyphus. You know, that guy who has to push a rock up a hill, and then every day it falls back down and he has to do it over and over again? Well, being in learning brain is like being up on the high parts of that mountain. You can see the expanse of what's going on, but it also takes a lot of work to be up there. And at any second, if you're not paying attention and putting effort into it, it's so easy to slip back into survival brain again. And that rock that Sisyphus is trying to push up, well, that's kind of like stress. And the more stressed you feel, the heavier and bigger that rock gets, and it just pushes you back into survival brain quicker. Now, the kicker is that for traumatized people, stress is a really rigid and intense thing. And so with trauma, any little stress makes that rock grow way bigger than it normally would. And because people with trauma misperceive ambiguous situations as threatening and stressful, that rock just stays big all the time. Now, the good news is that the more you control stress, well, the easier it is to be in learning brain, right? Because that rock is a lot smaller. And what I really want to highlight for teachers is that the best way to keep students in learning brain goes back to why I spent so much time talking about attachment. Students best learn when they feel like they're safe and supported by the adults around them. So it's kind of like a baby elephant. You know how like on those nature shows, the baby elephant is like playing with leaves or exploring a tree or something like that and having a lot of fun. And the only reason why they can do that is because there's a whole group of mama elephants around that baby protecting it and looking out for danger. So a kid with trauma or who's stuck in survival brain, it's kind of like that baby elephant who doesn't have protective adults around them. They can't play and learn because they're way too focused looking out for threat and danger. So this is why I really believe that the most important thing that schools need to focus on, way more important than any kind of techniques or curricula, is really whether or not they are creating that environment where students feel like they're surrounded by these big mama elephants who are going to protect them and watch out for them and make them safe. And when students have that, I bet you it unlocks their curiosity, their eagerness to learn, and play as a way to learn. So I hope that's helpful.
We hope that all individuals in schools are able to be present and engaged to utilize their learning brains. How do your schools create an environment where students and staff feel safe and protected?
I have a few examples I could share. First and foremost, we have moved away from using the word substitute teacher in our buildings. Instead, we use the word guest teacher. And prepping a student for a guest teacher, we ask the students, how do you treat a guest in your home? Because that is how we want our guest teachers treated. Additionally, our building administrators, I've seen an increase in them putting their offices on a cart in the hallway, where they are readily available to greet students, provide behavior-specific praise, give high fives, hugs, etc. Our building administration is very visible in our schools. Teachers are ready at the classroom door each morning to greet students with their choice of a high five, a hug, a fist pump, a wave, a verbal greeting, a wiggle, etc. This starts their days off on the right foot. Also choice. Choice is big with students with trauma. Traumatized students feel they do not have control in their lives, and offering choice gives them a sense of control.
There was an experiment done with mice and cherry blossoms, which demonstrates how a reaction to trauma may be passed down for generations.
The sweet smell of fruit doesn't normally send rats running. But when researchers paired the orange cherry almondy scent of the chemical acetophenone with a painful electric shock, lab rats quickly learned to fear it. Along the way, extra neurons sprouted in their noses and in the smell processing center of their brains, making them super sensitive to the scent. This result isn't shocking. What is surprising is that the rats' pups and their pups' pups were also startled by the smell of acetophenone and had the same extra neurons as their fathers, despite never having been introduced to either their dads or the fruity scent before. But how could the pups have inherited something that their fathers learned? Basic genetics tells us that only DNA gets passed along to offspring. Characteristics like memories, scars, or giant muscles can't get passed on since acquiring them doesn't alter the genetic code. But it turns out that instilling fear in the rats did trigger genetic changes, not in the DNA sequence itself, but instead in how that code was read and used in the rats' bodies. In every cell, biological machinery constantly translates DNA into the proteins needed to carry out vital processes. Chemical switches attached to the DNA turn genes on or off or up and down, telling the machinery which proteins to produce and in what quantities. These switches, called epigenetic tags, are why a kidney cell looks and acts differently than a skin or nerve cell, even though all three cells have identical DNA. But the switches in any one cell aren't set in stone. Teaching those rats to fear the fruity smell switched one of their smell-sensing genes into overdrive. Researchers don't know all the places in the rats' bodies where this switch got flipped, but they know it happened in one key set of cells, the rats' sperm cells, which would one day pass along the tweaked genetic material, making the next generation of rats super sensitive to acetophenone. Rodents aren't the only creatures demonstrating this weird type of inheritance. In Överkalix, Sweden, boys who suffered through tough winter famines went on to have super healthy sons, with extremely low rates of heart disease and diabetes. And their sons had the same excellent health, living an unbelievable 32 years longer on average than the grandsons of boys who hadn't gone hungry. To be clear, this does not mean that we should start starving our kids for the benefit of future generations. Scientists don't even know yet exactly which switches the Swedish famines flipped. While we have been able to connect specific epigenetic changes to health effects in mice, we're a long way off from being able to make those connections in humans. That may sound like a bummer, but it's mostly because we humans don't live in the well-controlled environment of a laboratory. And for that, we should be grateful.
In 2007, Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris founded the Bayview Child Health Center in San Francisco's Bayview Hunters Point neighborhood and discovered how severely early adversity was harming the developing brains and bodies of the children she was charged with treating. She realized these children were suffering not only mental health symptoms, difficulty concentrating and acting out at home and in school, but physical illnesses as well, growth below expected milestones, obesity, skin disease, and diabetes. Dr. Burke Harris, who went on to become the first Surgeon General of the state of California, did graduate work at the Hayes Lab and knew the dangers of stress in a place where it was all too common. Researchers at the Hayes Lab studied the maturation of tadpoles to toads while dosing them with steroid hormones. They noticed how the tadpole's growth and later metamorphosis had been affected. If the toads were exposed to corticosterone late in development, it sped up their metamorphosis from tadpoles to toads. If, however, the tadpoles were exposed to the steroid for a prolonged period or early in development, it inhibited their growth, decreased their immune function, diminished lung function, increased blood pressure, and impaired neurological development. And some of the tadpoles never became toads at all. Based on research, as well as her training, Dr. Burke Harris understood that cortisol, a stress hormone, inhibited growth, increased blood pressure, blood sugar, and produced other related effects. These were effective strategies for short periods of time when danger was present and required a rapid response. But when sustained over long periods of time, they dysregulated the stress response system in humans, the same way it did in the tadpoles. Dr. Burke Harris hypothesized that the same effect she had observed in the tadpoles was the same effect toxic stress was having on the health of her young patients. She wrote a book about this experience, The Deepest Well, which documents the implementation of trauma-informed care at the Bayview Child Health Center in San Francisco. We all wish to achieve our full potential. For this to occur, we need to have our basic needs met. As much as we require food, water, warmth, and rest, we also require safety and security. When these needs are not met, feelings of belonging and self-esteem are placed out of reach, and self-actualization, achieving our full potential, is out of the question. Our brains, intricate networks of neurons and synapses, are wired for safety. From the earliest moments of our existence, they diligently scan our environment, assessing threats and opportunities. Like vigilant sentinels, they react swiftly to danger, triggering the fight or flight response when faced with peril. Fear courses through our neural pathways. It whispers caution in our ears and compels us to seek shelter, to huddle close to the warmth of familiarity. Within this fortress of safety, the safety that big mama elephants provide for baby elephants, our minds yearn for exploration. Curiosity beckons us to venture beyond the known. We crave novelty, hunger for discovery, the thrill of uncharted territories. We are set to learn. When additional grant money for the Bayview Child Health Center was obtained, Dr. Burke Harris hired a mental health therapist. Dr. Whitney Clark introduced her to a study performed in San Diego at Kaiser Permanente in collaboration with the Center for Disease Control by Drs. Vincent Felitti, Robert Anda, and colleagues. This was the original Adverse Childhood Experience, or ACE study. Dr. Vincent Felitti was the chief of preventative medicine at Kaiser Permanente in San Diego, California. He couldn't figure out why more than half of the people in his obesity clinic dropped out, even those who initially did well. He discovered that for many of his patients, especially his female patients, obesity was the solution to romantic interest from men after a history of sexual abuse. Dr. Robert Anda with the CDC had been studying how depression and feelings of hopelessness affect coronary heart disease. I became interested in going deeper, he stated, because I thought there must be something beneath the behaviors generating them. Before the ACE Adverse Childhood Experiences study, prevailing beliefs among experts asserted that young children were largely unaffected by early childhood trauma. The conventional wisdom held that the children, especially those too young to form lasting memories, could navigate through adverse experiences without enduring long-term consequences. Prior to 1980, a misconception prevailed that infants did not experience pain in the same way as adults, leading to the practice of performing surgeries on these infants without anesthesia. While Dr. Burke Harris knew she was working with an underserved, at-risk population in the Bayview Heights neighborhood of San Francisco, the ACE study was conducted in San Diego with 17,000 primarily white middle-class adults who all had access to health care at Kaiser Permanente. Each person in the study indicated whether any of 10 adverse experiences occurred during his or her childhood. Only 1/3 reported none. More than 2/3 had undergone at least one adverse childhood experience. 1 in 8 had undergone 4 or more. The 10 adverse childhood experiences were emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, having their mother treated violently, experiencing substance abuse in the home, having a family member with a mental illness, going through a divorce or separation of the parents, having a family member incarcerated, experiencing emotional neglect and/or physical neglect. The ACE study revealed 2 startling conclusions. The first was that ACEs are the leading cause of health and social problem in our nation, including depression, anxiety, suicide, sexual behavior problems, unintended pregnancy, violence, issues in the workplace, alcohol dependence and abuse, drug dependence and abuse, chronic obstructive lung disease, coronary heart disease, obesity, liver disease, and fetal death. The second startling conclusion was that ACEs affect 2 out of every 3 of us, and that they are incredibly common. Recall that this study was conducted with 17,000 primarily white middle-class adults in San Diego. While 1/4 of us have only undergone a single adverse childhood experience, 1 out of 6 of us have experienced 4 or more. It's not just them, it's us.
We know that ACEs and toxic stress will impact our experiences, how we view the world, and how we navigate throughout the day. We will now explore some practical strategies to mitigate some of these stressors.
I have 2 practices that I do each day. The first is a morning meditation. It's not a big long meditation. It's just while my coffee is brewing. and my daughter's still in bed, I just close my eyes, I set an intention for the day, such as what I think I become or think positive today, and then I just follow this up with a 5-minute sun salutation, which is a stretch, just to get my body open to the energy that's going to come my way. Additionally, at the end of the day, I have an old mason jar on my kitchen table where I have a gratitude jar. I write something from the day that I'm grateful for. And this is a great resource to pull from when I'm feeling sad, underappreciated, or bitter. I invite you to have a long-term committed relationship with your practices. Let them be part of your daily routines. Nothing special, and yet so much magic. That is powerful medicine. Keep on showing up. Cultivate this long-term relationship.
Some other ideas are, I wake up before everyone else so I can get ready in the morning with some peace and quiet. I made a change this year to eat healthier to improve my overall health. And my favorite is I like to watch silly reality TV at night so I can decompress and not have to use any brain power and completely just relax.
For me, I tend to be a night person, so having some quiet time at the end of the night after the kids have gone to bed is just relaxing. Sometimes a hot bath, watching brainless TV with my kids before they go to bed, and crocheting. And oftentimes it's just making time with friends to do things that are completely unrelated to anything else.
For me, I like to listen to personal development podcasts in my car when I'm driving around without my kids. I read a lot before going to bed. At dinner times, we like to play a lot of board games as a family. We get pretty competitive, so we spend a lot of time doing that.
Individuals who report higher ACE scores are more likely to have issues with their health and social problems. As the ACE score rises, the chances of health and social issues also rise. This is called a dose-response relationship. The more ACEs, the greater the chance of related issues. And while the original ACE questions were revealing and enlightening in their prevalence, other factors also create toxic stress. According to a recent study on behalf of the Society of Biological Psychiatry, racism is a chronic stressor fueled by stigma that can result in significant distress and dysfunction, as well as negatively affect emotions, behavior, quality of life, and brain health. The effects of stigma and discrimination emerge early in life, with long-term consequences. Dr. Burke Harris identified 6 mitigating interventions for those with multiple ACE scores: improve sleep hygiene, exercise, better nutrition, a mindfulness practice, mental health treatment, and most important, healthier relationships. Dr. Gabor Mate is a recognized expert in trauma and addiction.
If you remember that trauma is not what happens to you, but what happens inside you, it's the wound. People can be wounded not just by bad things happening to them, but small children can be wounded in loving families where they don't get their needs met. I mean, that's obvious in a physical sense. If a child doesn't get proper nutrition, their body will suffer, their mind will suffer. We're also creatures with emotional needs as important as our physical needs. So when the child's emotional needs are not met, that child is wounded. And that's what we call small T trauma, which is not the big ticket events, such as I described, but just the child's need to be loved unconditionally, to be held when distressed, to be responded to be seen, to be heard, to be allowed their full range of emotion without them being stamped on in the name of so-called discipline. the right to play creatively, spontaneously, out there in nature, not with these damn digital gadgets that subvert and hijack the child's imagination, but spontaneous play that's essential for brain development. So what I'm saying is that when these needs are not for the unconditional loving attachment relationship, when those needs are frustrated, children are also hurt. And I call that trauma as well, because it shows up later in life as the impact of painful wounds. So trauma in this society, for all kinds of reasons, is far more common than we imagine.
Wouldn't it be wonderful to be able to tell a single child or a group of children to simply calm down and have it work? In the history of calm down, no one has ever calmed down by being told to calm down.
Every day our students carry with them much more than what is contained in their backpacks. And if you believe that every behavior is a form of communication, then if you sift through what is behind the behavior, you'll soon realize just how courageous our students are for just showing up. But not to despair, we as educators can do so much more to help them repair the damage done to them. Let's demystify the complexities of becoming a trauma-informed school community. Remember, it's always going to be the little things that have the greatest impact. And it all starts with the educator mindset. So keep this in mind. You don't have to be a therapist to be therapeutic. So with that, let's dive right in. What does all this look like in the classroom? Well, think about that hard-to-reach student that appears to be a million miles away or distant to connect. Don't take it personally that he or she isn't paying attention to your lesson plans that you thought would light up the Las Vegas Strip. It rarely has anything to do with you and all about the demons that are wrestling inside of them. Allow these three components of a trauma-informed community to be your lighthouse. That is, creating a safe environment, building healthy relationships and connectedness, and finally, supporting and teaching emotional regulation skills. So here are a few ways in which you can do that. Next time you see that student off task, instead of bringing attention to the student, use that as your internal barometer to incorporate a mindfulness activity, say a short stretching exercise. You'll find this not only helps that particular student, but will benefit the entire classroom, as well as you, the teacher. You are priming brains for learning. I'm describing a concept called universal design for learning. I call it simply best practices. Your ultimate goal should be to empower your students to know what their triggers are and how to teach them best to mitigate them as they arise. Keep in mind, for students to self-regulate, as I'm describing here, you, the educator, will need to have a command on this first. That process is called co-regulation. So why are we witnessing so many social emotional deficiencies with our students as young as preschool? Well, let's talk about attachments. If you were raised in a nurturing environment, your needs were typically met when you cried out for help by a soothing parent. This in turn helped you develop social emotional competencies needed to successfully navigate throughout life experiences. Without this nurturing environment, students are stunted in their growth. Hence, the importance of teacher skill sets in this area. Self-regulation cannot occur without co-regulation modeling. No big revelation here, as this is true with any new concepts we teach. Over time, your room will become safe spaces for your students to get their emotional regulation needs met. You begin to see incredible changes, but keep in mind, it won't happen overnight as students coming from dysfunctional home environments have learned throughout their lifetime that putting trust into adults has caused them much pain and suffering. Betrayal from caregivers are some of the hardest hurts to overcome. Our best response is to flood them with love, as hard as it might be. This is where the real magic happens. Equipping your students with the life skills that they can take with them out the door. You'll find that your students will thrive when empowered. Allowing them to be the director of their own emotional regulation will turn your safe spaces, which are typically designed from an adult privilege lens, into brave spaces, or spaces designed by those impacted the most, your students. Remaining uncompromising in this approach will open the door for trusting relationships to flourish. Let me leave you with a final thought. If trauma-informed sounds too complicated, then call it what it really is. Relational informed. That, my friends, is the secret sauce of our movement.
A key concept in becoming relationally informed is to approach others with the mentality of what happened to you versus what's wrong with you. Educators in our district pair this conceptual framework with other components of a trauma-informed classroom. We will learn how they create a safe environment, build connections, and support emotional regulation skills.
Creating a safe and welcoming environment for students begins the minute they enter the classroom. Students can read your face, your body language, and your tone of voice. Greet students as they arrive with a smile every day. Start making connections with students from those first day icebreakers, and take note of their interests and hobbies and weave those into daily conversations or lessons with them. This helps to build the connection between students and teacher. Creating a community within the classroom helps to build healthy relationships amongst peers. Planning collaborative activities can help teach students how to properly interact with one another and encourage relationship building skills. Taking time for group activities, partner work, and inserting play into your lessons can encourage student motivation and build that positive environment. Emotional regulation skills can be taught and modeled throughout the school day. Teachers are constantly regulating their own emotions and can model deep breathing, grounding, or another mindfulness technique as they use them. Additionally, essential skills can be taught and practiced through group lessons or individualized.
Having taught self-contained, I had students with a wide range of abilities. Creating visuals that use real-life images or images they are familiar with on their AAC devices is helpful in making those connections with these students. I found it useful to make personalized toolbox choices for students that were relevant to strategies that would be calming for them. Toolboxes should not be a one-size-fits-all, because as adults we know what is calming for one person is not always calming for another. A fun idea is to take real-life photos of that student in those states of emotions and then also using their toolboxes to make social stories that will make the biggest connection for them. The more real life that you can make these tools, the better the student will connect with it.
Dr. Bruce Perry developed the neurosequential model, which emphasizes that in order to teach effectively, it is necessary to first help a child regulate themselves, then relate to them, and then, and only then, will you be able to reason with them. Next, you'll hear about the neurosequential model from Bruce Perry himself.
One of the things that we teach with the neurosequential model is a very simple way to think about this. And it basically is that in order to get to the cortex to be able to reason with somebody, you first need to be connected with them in some way, relationally connected. And so that's kind of the middle part of the brain. But before you can sort of effectively connect with somebody, there has to be at least a minimal degree of regulation. So a very dysregulated kid who's afraid is not going to be able to successfully be engaged. And if you can't engage them to sort of be with you in this moment, they're certainly not going to be able to cognitively learn anything. So we talk about this sequence of engagement. Regulate, relate, and then reason. And one of the things that we see that happens all the time, both with parenting and coaching and teaching, is that all too often we adults try to reason with somebody before they're regulated. And of course, that never really works. I mean, all of us, probably had the experience of somebody, coming up to us when we're sort of frustrated and saying, calm down. And as you well know, that very rarely works. In fact, it usually escalates you, makes you feel even more dysregulated. So the fundamental principle of this neurosequential model is to appreciate that the brain is involved in learning, the neuro part. Sequential is that the processing and development of the brain is sequential. And then really the third part is that you have to adhere, you have to follow the rules. You have to follow the rules of the biological organization of the brain if you're going to be successful in parenting, teaching, coaching. I think one of the most important things that educators need to understand about the brain is the way the brain processes incoming information. And the reason that's so important is that the human brain is basically organized in a hierarchical way. So there's kind of a bottom part of the brain, a middle part, and then the top part. And the top part is an area we call the cortex, and I think most everybody's heard of that. And the cortex is the most uniquely human part of the brain. And all of the networks up in the cortex are the systems that help us learn language. They're responsible for sort of autobiographical memory. They're responsible for the ability to think about the future, to think about the past, and essentially every topic that an educator will teach has to get to systems in the cortex. And so really the job of the educator and the job of the coach and the job of the parent and the job of anybody who wants to sort of change the human part of the brain is to get to the cortex. Now the dilemma is that when I talk with you, the sound waves are translated into pattern neuronal activity that go into lower parts of the brain. And then they get processed, and then they go to the middle part of the brain, and they get processed, and then they finally get to the top part of the brain. And so you don't automatically teach by having a really good thing in the teacher's cortex that immediately gets into the cortex of the child. And so what you have to do is get through the middle part of the teacher's brain, the lower part of the teacher's brain, out into space, into the lowest part of the student's brain, into the middle part of the student's brain, and then finally up to the cortex. So there's a lot of places where that can go wrong. And the reason educators need to understand a little bit about stress, distress, and trauma is that all of those things will interfere with that process in ways sometimes subtle, but sometimes in really extreme ways. You may have a child who comes into the classroom who's very well regulated. Their stress response system is completely normal. And what that means is when they're sitting and listening in a classroom that's predictable, consistent, the teacher's kind, and their cortex is open for business, which means that the teacher will successfully be able to get through sort of that, that obstacle course to get to the cortex. But if somebody has a history of trauma, the stress response system will be abnormally activated, and that will shut down the cortex so that even if you're a really good teacher, the incoming input, the words and the nonverbal cues and all of the things that you use to teach, they're going to get short-circuited on the way to the cortex, and that child will not learn as much.
The 6 R's are a framework for creating the rich developmental experiences needed to heal trauma. They require a relational and safe approach, an approach relevant to the individual, repetition, rewarding, rhythmic, and respectful. We'll look at each of these in turn. You know that the key to learning involves building strong relationships. The more you can know each student individually, show genuine interest in their lives, listen attentively, and validate their emotions, the better they will learn. Some tips for creating developmentally relevant interactions are to focus interventions on teaching and strengthening skills rather than shaming children for their mistakes, recognizing that children may be at different emotional or cognitive stages, and remembering that stress makes it more challenging to learn and perform. Some tips for incorporating repetition are to establish predictable schedules, because students thrive when they know what to expect and flourish when they are able to celebrate small achievements consistently. Some tips for creating rewarding experiences are highlighting students' achievements, acknowledging their efforts and growth, creating a positive atmosphere, encouraging a love for learning, creating lessons that are enjoyable and meaningful, and being specific and sincere in your praise. While this may seem to be a foreign concept, except to the music teachers, incorporating rhythm is a natural human desire. We all love music, don't we? Even allowing students to stretch or move during transitions can be helpful. If you can use a transition song or piece of music when shifting activities, it will help the students to reset their minds. Even clapping between tasks creates a transition, and adding planned rhythmic activities like drumming or walking and breathing together will create welcome changes in attitude and focus. Although your students can often become dysregulated, please remember that children's emotions are real and valid. Involving students in decision-making shows that you respect their perspectives. Please be aware of the impact of race and culture on children's identities, and try actively listening to your students, reflecting their thoughts and feelings, and communicating empathy.
Let's take a moment to think through the 6 R's that help to support a neurosequential model in the classroom. We are going to focus on a school environment that is relational, relevant, repetitive, rewarding, rhythmic, and respectful.
The relational classroom is all about making connections with your students, providing a choice for greeting at arrival, listening without distractions, getting to students' eye level, and just remembering that students don't care what you know until they know that you care. That's a quote by John C. Maxwell that rings true in a lot of my work.
A relevant classroom. Encourage students to make mistakes. Students with trauma, they don't like to make mistakes because they don't want to be wrong with something. So by encouraging mistakes throughout the entire classroom, it helps students grow. Work with students to correct and learn from their mistakes. Praise the process, that they made the mistakes, yet they found the way to get past that. Differentiate for students based on their cognitive or emotional state. Stress and trauma make learning more difficult.
A repetitive classroom is very patterned. We need to provide predictable schedules that are posted front and center of our classroom that are visible to all. We need to refer to those schedules throughout the day and with each transition. Additionally, consistent expectations and routines should be taught, practiced, reinforced, and referred to. Consistency in our lesson structures The format, the delivery, and the follow-up will provide that sense of predictability for students to make them feel safe and trusted. Additionally, the follow-through of saying what we mean and meaning what we say will help students have consistency in their day.
Rewarding. Be specific with your praise. Not just saying, oh, you did a good job with that, but specifically saying, I like how you followed the lines and followed through with all of the coloring. You know, it helps the students to know exactly what you are praising them for. Give certificates to students who show growth. Maybe not everyone was able to get it perfect, but they showed growth and they showed progress. Encourage students to be curious and cultivate a love of learning.
Okay, let's talk about the rhythmic classroom. Your tone, your volume, and the cadence of your speech impacts the students you work with. It's the old saying of, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. Using music for transitions, using the same specific song for snack time, using a different specific song for cleanup, and another one for transition allows the rhythm of the music to cue your transition instead of your voice. It will just start happening naturally. Another example of rhythmic classroom would be bouncing a ball to a beat while memorizing the multiplication facts and giving the energy out you would like to receive.
For a respectful classroom, respect is kindness. The cortex is open for business when kindness is used. So give choices. Choices, as said before, allow students for some semblance of control. Also, actively listening to the students helps them feel your respect towards them.
When teaching vocabulary, consider emotional granularity. Teaching various vocabulary words for similar emotions allows children to properly identify what they are feeling. When students are able to accurately identify their feelings, they are able to communicate with themselves as well as with others. Vocabulary teaches language, and language allows children to communicate effectively. When students are able to communicate effectively with themselves and with others, they are better able to self-regulate.
Emotional granularity, how it works and why it matters. Emotional granularity refers to the ability to recognize, understand, and differentiate between various emotions with precision and nuance. It involves identifying the subtleties that exist within our emotional experiences and labeling them accurately. By developing a rich emotional vocabulary, individuals can better understand their feelings, manage their emotions, and enhance their interpersonal relationships. Importance of understanding emotions in personal development. Emotions play a significant role in our everyday lives, guiding our thoughts, actions, and decision-making processes. Developing a greater understanding of our emotions through emotional granularity can lead to improved emotional regulation, better self-awareness, and enhanced relationships with others. In the context of personal development, emotional granularity can be a valuable tool for cultivating emotional intelligence and fostering psychological resilience. What is emotional granularity? Emotional granularity is the ability to differentiate and describe one's emotions with a high level of detail and specificity. It involves recognizing the subtleties and nuances that exist within our emotional experiences and being able to accurately label and articulate these feelings. For example, instead of just feeling bad, someone with high emotional granularity might recognize that they feel disappointed, frustrated, or anxious. Differentiation between emotions and emotional granularity. While emotions refer to the complex psychological states that arise in response to various stimuli, emotional granularity is about the ability to perceive, understand, and differentiate between these emotional experiences. High emotional granularity allows individuals to discern the subtle differences between emotions, even those that may seem similar at first glance, such as irritation and anger, or contentment and joy. This fine-tuned understanding of emotions helps in regulating them effectively and navigating interpersonal relationships with greater ease. The benefits of emotional granularity. Improved emotional regulation. High emotional granularity enables individuals to better understand and manage their emotions. By accurately identifying and labeling their feelings, they can develop more effective strategies for coping with and regulating their emotions. This improved emotional regulation can lead to increased well-being, reduced stress, and greater overall psychological health. Enhanced self-awareness and self-understanding. Developing emotional granularity fosters greater self-awareness, as individuals become more attuned to their emotional experiences. This heightened awareness allows them to gain deeper insights into their emotional patterns and triggers, promoting better self-understanding. As a result, they can make more informed decisions, set healthier boundaries, and cultivate a stronger sense of self. Better interpersonal relationships. High emotional granularity also contributes to improved interpersonal relationships. By understanding their emotions more clearly, individuals can communicate their feelings more effectively to others, fostering better connections and empathy. Additionally, the ability to accurately perceive and understand the emotions of others can help in resolving conflicts, offering support, and building strong, healthy relationships. Greater psychological resilience. Emotional granularity can also enhance psychological resilience, as individuals with a nuanced understanding of their emotions are better equipped to cope with adversity and stress. The ability to accurately label and understand emotions can prevent individuals from becoming overwhelmed by negative feelings and help them to maintain a balanced perspective during challenging times. Techniques to develop emotional granularity. Mindfulness and meditation practices. Mindfulness and meditation practices can help individuals cultivate emotional granularity by encouraging greater awareness of their emotional experiences. Techniques such as body scan meditation, loving kindness meditation, and mindfulness-based stress reduction can help individuals become more attuned to their emotions and develop a more nuanced understanding of their feelings. Journaling and introspective writing. Engaging in journaling and introspective writing exercises can also promote emotional granularity. By reflecting on and writing about their emotions, individuals can deepen their understanding of their feelings, identify patterns, and develop a more refined emotional vocabulary. Seeking feedback from others. Soliciting feedback from trusted friends, family members, or therapists can help individuals develop emotional granularity by providing external perspectives on their emotions. This feedback can help them to better understand their feelings, identify blind spots, and gain insight into the emotions of others. Engaging in emotional reflection and exploration. Actively engaging in emotional reflection and exploration can foster emotional granularity. This may involve reading books, attending workshops, or participating in therapy focused on emotions and emotional intelligence. By continually learning about and exploring their emotions, individuals can enhance their emotional granularity and overall emotional well-being. Emotional granularity plays a crucial role in personal development, allowing individuals to better understand and navigate their emotional experiences. By accurately identifying and differentiating between emotions, they can improve emotional regulation, enhance self-awareness, and foster healthier relationships. Furthermore, emotional granularity contributes to the development of emotional intelligence, leading to greater psychological resilience and overall well-being. Actively cultivating emotional granularity can lead to a more fulfilling, emotionally rich life. By engaging in practices such as mindfulness meditation, journaling, introspective writing, seeking feedback from others, and continually learning about emotions, individuals can enhance their emotional granularity and unlock the full potential of their emotional experiences. As a result, they can enjoy the numerous benefits associated with improved emotional intelligence, leading to a more satisfying and balanced life.
Best-selling author and researcher Brené Brown. Her TED Talk, The Power of Vulnerability, has been viewed nearly, listen to this number, 60 million times. Her latest research delves into 87 emotions and experiences that she says we all have in common. She writes about all of them in her new book. It's called Atlas of the Heart, Mapping Meaningful Connection in the Language of Human Experience. Brene Brown is with us in the studio. And listen, before we get started, Brene Brown walked into the studio rapping.
I mean, Sugar Hill Records. Like you're either there
just give the one line that you gave to us. Just
I don't
the
mean
one.
to brag. I don't mean to boast, but I like hot butter on my breakfast toast. Check it out, Bubba.
Okay, MC Brene in the house.
I had the 12-inch vinyl.
I know, that was pretty good. That was very
Classic.
good, Brene. She had a couple of them. All right, so you talked to 7,000 different people in your research, and the most common emotions that kept coming up, happy, sad, angry, kept coming up over and over again. What does that say about us that those were the top three that came when there were so many different emotions we all experienced?
I was so surprised. I mean, we started the research asking how many emotions can we recognize in ourselves as we're feeling them? And I guess the mean or the average number would be 6 or 7.
Yeah.
And it was just happy, sad, mad.
Yeah.
And it was so alarming because when we don't have language that's as expansive as our actual experiences, we force experiences into language. And that's troublesome because language does much more than communicate what we're feeling.
Yeah. Right.
It actually shapes what we're feeling.
What got me is that I didn't even think of things as emotions that are emotions. Like you said, disappointment. Disappointment is unmet expectations, and disappointment and regret are interwoven.
Yeah, I mean, this is like the story of not only my marriage, but most people's. Like, you have all these huge expectations, right? You're like, I'm gonna walk in and this is how it's gonna go, and he's gonna say this, and then, and then within seconds, the movie doesn't play out how you had it in your head.
Yep.
And then what you experience is disappointment.
So many people, and in particular men, don't want to name their emotions. And one of the things you hear is that if you name it, it has power over you.
Yeah.
You think, no, the opposite, in fact. Why?
We have a lot of data that support that's really a dangerous myth. When we name what we're feeling, it doesn't have power over us. We gain power. We have the ability to say, I mean, there's really strong evidence that shows the ability to accurately name and recognize emotion, we call it emotional granularity, really leads to the ability to manage it and move through it.
Yeah, if I identify it, I have a better chance of managing it.
That's it.
Kind of explain the concept of near enemies. I think it's absolutely powerful.
God, it blew me away. So it's a Buddhist concept. And let's take an emotion like compassion. We know the far enemy of compassion is cruelty.
Right.
But the problem is that there's a near enemy that kind of dresses up a little bit like compassion, and we think maybe can pass for compassion, but it actually unravels connection. So the near enemy of compassion is pity. So I see you struggling, and I'm like, oh, you poor thing, I'm so sorry. And you're thinking, God, that doesn't feel good at all.
That could do more damage.
That does more damage.
Yeah.
So the near enemy concept has been super helpful.
The difference between, you say, stress and overwhelm, which are a lot of people are feeling these days.
Yeah, so stress is something that we can manage pretty much on it. We do it every day.
Yep.
Like, I always use an analogy. I used to wait tables and bartend, and we'd say, I'm in the weeds. Like, I'm in the weeds. Lots of stuff going on. I'm in the weeds. Overwhelm is a very high level of stress that actually leads to shutdown. We don't function when we're overwhelmed. And because language shapes what we're experiencing, if we go through the day all day saying, I'm overwhelmed, our body says, oh, okay, we're kind of shutting down.
Right.
Yeah. And so it's like if I said bake cookies.
Yep.
Let's bake some chocolate chip cookies. And the bowl we picked changed the flavor of the cookie. The language we use changes what we experience.
Yeah.
That's why you should be in tune with your emotions.
Most people have 3 emotions that they can name. Read this book, you can get to 87.
So one of the biggest challenges in education is in the whole area of discipline. And in my mind, discipline is related to the biology of reward and the biology of distress. And it's interesting to me that, by and large, when you are criticized or when you do something wrong, or when you are publicly given a consequence, shamed or disciplined, or suspended, or excluded from the class, or from recess for some activity, it is not a positive experience, right? And so here's what we know about the brain and its capacity to learn when you feel distressed. It can't learn. And so the crazy, the mind-blowing crazy thing about this is that how do you think that shaming or punishing somebody is going to make it easier for that person to learn? It's crazy. It does the exact opposite of what you are theoretically trying to achieve. If you want somebody to learn something, as we've said a lot, they need to feel safe. They need to feel like they belong. You don't extrude them, you don't exclude them, you don't shame them, you don't punish them, and then say, now learn algebra. The fundamental of contingency-based practices yoked to learning is ridiculous. Contingency-based programs were never intended to teach new concepts. Contingency-based programs in animal models and in human models basically reinforce existing internalized content. In other words, stuff you've already learned. Now, the good news is that there are ways that you can take advantage of the biology of the brain, take advantage of the neurobiology of reward and regulation, and understand stress and distress, and create environments where there is order, where there is accountability, where there is responsibility, all the things that we want to help people develop as children and young adults. So some of my favorite are practices that use a community engagement model, like restorative justice practices, or practices that take advantage of this inherently biologically powerful relational process of collaborating, like collaborative problem solving. And so when you bring those practices into a school environment, rather than shaming somebody and blaming and excluding, you're bringing somebody back into connection. People are their best when they're in community, when they're connected, when they feel safe, when they feel like they belong, and then they will learn. They can hear you. They can understand the consequences of the behavior. They can think about the future and go, yeah, that wouldn't work. They can reflect on the past and go, oh, that was really stupid. And that's how you change. You don't change by terrorizing somebody into a state of dysregulation where you're basically interacting with someone who's thinking at the level of a rabbit. You know, rabbits are not particularly good thinkers. So the idea that some of these practices are too soft really is I think, false. I think that that's community building. I think that that's giving people a better a chance. I mean, I have seen the consequences of the punishment system in our society. We know that those systems don't work very well, and we have a lot of evidence that when you treat people with respect, when you teach them skills, when you give them opportunities, when you treat them in a respectful, humane way, the probability that they'll be sociopathic and predatory and everything, that it all diminishes. The vast majority of crime and the vast majority of problems that end up being disciplined about in schools are things that are related to fear, to confusion, anger, lack of skills. These are things that are easily repairable if you identify and treat the right thing, as opposed to, or identify and address the correct thing, as opposed to shame, blame, exclude, humiliate. That never, ever leads to good things. Nobody who's been humiliated and shamed and degraded and marginalized ends up as a that doesn't breed compassion and goodwill and civic engagement and all this, the stuff that we want in a healthy society, you don't get by humiliating people.
What does it mean to make the world a better place?
Nice! So those are those big questions we're focusing on.
For me, being trauma-informed has so much to do with mindset, accepting that different people come into a school setting with incredibly varied life experiences. Some of those life experiences may be traumatic, and the way in which that plays out in my particular classroom could look a number of ways. And by me having that lens, it makes it less about are they doing the right thing or the wrong thing, and more about where is that behavior coming from, why is that happening.
Adverse childhood experiences like poverty, neglect, exposure to violence can bring about overwhelming stress, which can cause negative effects on the learning brain and on behavior. If children have the experience of adversity, they will have uneven development of these foundational skills like self-regulation and executive function or relationship skills. These are the children who are at risk to fall further and further behind. But the good news is that there is a powerful antidote to stress, and that is the effect of the human relationship and the presence of trust. Schools are an ideal place to produce many different kinds of relationships that are capable of buffering stress. Schools themselves can be healing places.
If you're fearful, if you're anxious, if you're distracted about something that's happened to you, you literally can't learn. Your brain shuts down. So it's essential to give kids social and emotional tools that allow students to recover from the challenges that they have experienced. Take actual classroom time to work on the building blocks of how to perceive your emotions, how to talk about them, how to get along with other people, how to take a moment and become calm when you need to, how to express your needs so that others can meet them.
When we start to understand what it takes to be responsive to the effects of trauma, we need to think about the environment, about individual services, and we need to think about the skills and mindsets of kids that won't develop as they should when they're impacted by trauma.
I do a lot of work around self-awareness and being able to name emotions and then make a choice around those.
When I get mad, I take deep breaths, and that helps me get more calm.
Many of the things that we think about doing for kids who may have experienced trauma are good for everybody, and everyone will encounter some kind of adverse circumstance at some point in their life. And for some children, we're helping them deal with what's already happened in their lives. For others, we're preparing them to deal with the challenges later in their lives.
If you can hear my voice say, "We are awesome." We are awesome.
If you don't have a system that takes care of the educators, the efforts of the educators to create a regulated classroom will be undermined. One of the things that we've seen over the last couple of years during the pandemic is increasing awareness by organizations about self-care, about the needs of the people in the organization. And many organizations have, again, with good intentions, supported the development of individual self-care plans. And they brought in resources and supports to help people learn how to meditate and think about putting together a self-care plan, which is all well and good. However, one of the things that we know is that you can have the best self-care plan in the world, but if you go back day after day after day to an organization that is grinding you down, the self-care program can't overcome the destructive impact of being in an environment like that. And so we've continued to urge the development of organizational care models where the organization itself really looks at its own practices, program elements, and policies to ensure that they're in synchrony with basically a belief system that we're going to take care of the people who are doing all of this hard work. And again, it goes back to respect. If you claim that you respect your educators, you have to pay them adequately. You have to give them professional development opportunities. You have to consider co-teaching opportunities to sort of distribute the burden of some of these challenging activities. You have to think carefully about hours, about progressive maternity leave. You have to think about professional development in the area of leadership and trauma-informed care for your school board and for your administrators. Because if they don't understand these things, then they continue to use conventional organizational thinking about how to make schools effective. They're going to continue to grind down educators. And the consequences are not just that educators will, number one, flee the system, or number two, burn out so they're less effective. You're going to have profound impact on the outcomes of the school. Kids aren't going to want to learn as well. Parents are not going to be as engaged. The test scores are going to go down. All of the metrics that indicate success as an organization are going to go down. So it really is in the best interest of an organization, of the school district, of the school itself, to learn more about how organizations can become respectful, how they can create a sense of safety, how they can create a sense of community that leads to effectiveness. And I know it's possible, but I think it really needs to take place. There have been corporate organizations that in industry, there have been a number of other human service organizations, hospital corporations, for example, that have gone through a very intentional process to do this, and they've seen significant improvement in all of their outcomes. And I expect that when schools begin to do this, the same thing will happen.
What are some of the ways that you practice self-care?
I don't. Oh boy.
That's definitely a skill I need to get better at.
Self-care is hard, especially in this profession.
However, my focus has been to get outside more, do more engagement with our environment.
Cranking up the tunes in the kitchen. I'm cooking something delicious for my family.
There is more to life than just work, even if you really enjoy your career a lot, like we do.
I don't grade papers at home. I don't check my email very much at home, and I'm a better teacher when I have established healthy boundaries with work and leave work at work.
So one of the ways that I practice self-care is being able to say no. Sometimes you have to be able to take a step back and refresh before going on to that next project.
1-minute meditations. I just close my eyes, take a deep breath, and try not to think too much about what happens. And when I open my eyes, I feel much better.
Try to turn your brain off and let it be quiet sometimes.
Disconnecting from technology and distractions and spending time with the people that I love the most.
Before you assist others with the oxygen mask, assist yourself first. I like to exercise and be with my family, but yeah, assist yourself before assisting others.
I think it's really important to give myself the time to be creative. Even actually really digging in and researching is creative for me.
I play piano in the evenings. I read a book. I try to take time that is both being still and also being active.
Spending time in prayer, practicing yoga, or even spending time outdoors, like going boonie stomping around the jungles of Guam.
Fresh air and movement are key to restoring my sanity and perspective.
I get up before anybody in my family when it's still dark outside, and I go to the gym on some mornings, or I go just sit and have some quiet time to myself.
Or I am going for a walk, or I'm reading a book, or I'm taking a nap on the weekend.
I practice self-care by traveling. Sometimes it's good to get out of our bubble.
My best mode of self-care is to learn from my students. I've learned patience, I've learned empathy, I've learned the latest dance move.
To reach out to other teachers, share experiences, and have somebody to bounce ideas off of. It rejuvenates you and helps you reignite that passion for teaching.
As we just heard, supporting our faculty and ourselves is a key component of making sure we have capacity to care for students. Can you please speak to the culture of self-compassion and awareness?
In these days, we have heard a lot around the concept of self-care, and I think that it has become something that has somewhat of a negative connotation with educators because people can't conceptualize how they can take care of their students, go home and take care of their families, and still have time and energy left over for themselves. However, we are realizing more and more that when we take care of ourselves, we are able to be inside those roles in a more meaningful and impactful way. So we are talking a lot in educator circles around the concept of small changes that people can make to take care of themselves in a way that translates into being able to be more present, available, and supportive of their students. There are small things that can be done every day that allow you to take care of yourself and to replenish the bucket that seems to always be empty after a day inside a classroom or inside a school. We know that it is a difficult concept for many people to think about, but we also know that when we spend time as educators encouraging each other to take care of ourselves, we are able to see the translation into student improvement, both academically and also in the way they emotionally respond to the educational environment.
Next, we will learn about creating a physical environment that is trauma-informed.
The physical environment of your classroom affects morale and student learning. The environment should match your objectives both in terms of human interaction and instructional approach. When arranging desks or tables, take into consideration supplies, traffic flow, and student and teacher interactions. Your classroom doesn't need to look like a Pinterest board. However, students thrive in a classroom that is well organized and clutter-free. Decluttering your space can create a calm and inviting atmosphere that promotes peace and focus. Using minimal amounts of color in your decor creates a welcoming climate. You want your students to feel calm and comfortable in your classroom, and by creating an environment that establishes this feeling will help to keep the energy at a similar state.
Cool colors, such as blue, green, and purple, have a calming effect. Lighter colored rooms are perceived as more open, less crowded, and more spacious, providing a safer and more calming space. An open space with clear sight lines and few barriers can further increase a sense of safety. Using natural materials and colors increases connection to nature and a sense of calm. Rooms bright with natural light appear less crowded. And settings which include vegetation reduce stress, promote peace, tranquility, enhance self-esteem, and even a sense of mastery over the environment. Plants add value to your classroom. Art adds visual interest and can create a visual distraction that alleviates stress, improves mood, comfort, and satisfaction. Please know that resilience is not about bouncing back or getting over things. It's about growing through.
Sometimes we have the pleasure and privilege of knowing that the work we do really does matter. Let's hear of some success stories regarding impact.
I've found in my work that sometimes the simplest of interventions can make the most difference. An example is I had a student, a second grade student in a general ed setting that would come to my learning resource classroom for support. Every day she would cry and cry that she missed her mom and she wouldn't come to my reading table to do her work. I got the feeling that my room was more of a safe space for her to let those emotions out, so I decided to get a picture of her mom. I hung it inside of a privacy folder, and every day when she came to group, she got a 2-minute timer and had mom time before coming to her reading lesson. And this was a successful strategy for this child.
When I think of success stories, a second grade boy comes to mind who came from a home of domestic violence exposure, and this student would be overreactive to competitive activities and during leisure or unstructured times. Some things that we would do to help this little boy were, we would start him off with a soft start. I would meet him every morning with a smile, to give him encouragement and discuss all the things we were looking forward to that day. I took time to really make connections with him. We would do a lot of board games to practice losing and how we would handle that. I made him a personalized flip chart with the zones of regulation, and during PE and recess I would go with that child and model with him when it was appropriate to be in the green zone, when it was appropriate to be in the yellow zone, and if we got to the red zone, what were we going to do and how were we going to get back to that green zone. We made him a personalized cubby that he would like to sit in small spaces to hide. So we made him a cubby within the classroom that was just his, and he put some decor on the inside, some pictures that he found in magazines. We taped them to the wall, and that was his space that he knew he could go to when he needed to just be left alone. We made some personalized social stories with his pictures of things that I can do, and we let him help in creating the topics and things that he felt he could do. We took successful images, put that into a book, laminated it, and that was kind of his motivating book to start off his day during our chat time. Those are just a few strategies that we would implement throughout the day to help build those connections and make him feel that he had a safe and loving place to come to every day, and really help him work on how to regulate those emotions in a safe and effective way.
Many years ago, I had a student that came to me that would barely speak. She had a terrible experience in a classroom previously that created a lack of trust of teachers and adults. We worked with her to build her confidence in her teachers through kindness, conversation, and consistency. In addition, we provided her the educational support she needed. Slowly, the timid young girl began to look me in the eye, smile, laugh, and joke with us. She began to hold conversations, ask questions, feel comfortable doing so. Once she got older, into high school, her confidence bloomed even more so, and she participated in various theater productions, taking the lead, earning awards for her hard work and dedication.
Another success was an 8th grade student that was in my class, and he had a lot of work refusal. He came from a single parent home. His dad had left and had no contact with the student, and that resulted in him having a lot of issues with attachment and authority figures. Through working with him, we learned about him, learned his likes, gained his respect by giving him respect through a lot of kindness and getting to know him, just adjusting his assignments and working one-on-one. He came around and was able to turn in and pass his classes. That isn't something that was short. It took an entire year to get that success, and sometimes we don't know that success right away. Sometimes we won't know until years later when we hear from a past student about the impact that we have made on them. It takes a lot of time, but that time is worth it in the end. It's worth it to them, and it's worth it to you to know that you made a little difference or a big difference in someone's life. We all, as educators, we want our students to listen to us. But sometimes, and all the time actually, we need to listen to them first. Not necessarily the words that they say, but everything about them, their actions and their feelings.
We appreciate you taking the time with us today to better understand the needs of the students that come through your classroom doors. We know that unhealed people hear with their triggers, not their ears. Our students deserve to come to school to begin that healing process that they come to us with from past experiences, and know that school is a safe place for them to work through that process. The process may not be short, but when we are open to understanding that they are in the midst of that process and that we can be part of their village that allows them to work through it, to come out at the other end as strong, emotionally resilient adults, there is no stronger representation of educators or more powerful thing that we can do as educators with the privilege of working with students every day.
We plant seeds of kindness, compassion, knowledge, and innovation. The seeds we plant may germinate in days, weeks, or years. We may never see those seeds blossom. But if we take the time to notice the small acts of compassion that we see each and every day, and understand that no act of kindness, no matter how small, is ever wasted. And although the seeds we plant may take years to manifest in the lives of our students, they contribute to a culture of caring and understanding. And so, regardless of if, when, or how we witness the results, we will continue to plant seeds of kindness, compassion, knowledge, and innovation, knowing that they have the power to shape the future. We believe in the potential impact of nurturing inventive minds. And we know for certain kindness and understanding are always trauma-informed. Dr. Jacob Hamm has a unique approach to being trauma-informed.
Hey, welcome back everyone. Today I thought we would talk about the big question, what it really takes to become a trauma-informed organization. And I think my answer is actually quite different from what other people say, because I think other people focus on what actions should be taken, what needs assessments need to be done, or what services need to be put in place. And for me, I think that the most important thing is the moment when a person is about to become trauma reactive, and how well everyone else can handle that situation without becoming trauma reactive themselves. Because what I've learned from doing interviews of offenders or students or anyone who uses these trauma-informed organizations is that the most important thing that makes or breaks a person's day is actually the moment-to-moment interactions with people. And people as random as like the lunch lady in the cafeteria who will give you a full serving of food or not just based on whether or not they like you and how they feel that day. Or whether or not a safety officer will use excessive discipline just because they're frustrated with you. Those little moment-to-moment things are really what make people feel safe in an environment. And what I don't get is that the hospitality industry completely understands this. Every 5-star hotel or 5-star restaurant knows that service is the foundation upon which the whole experience rests. And so I really think that trauma-informed organizations need to take a hospitality mindset. And what hospitality means in a trauma-informed organization, I think, is that you're always being sensitive and attentive to the other person's needs and sensitive to their trauma reactiveness, and the fact that you yourself can be trauma reactive, and that you have to always guard against going into survival brain yourself, and to amp up as much as you can your ability to stay clear, to stay purpose-driven and goal-directed and emotionally attuned to the other people. Okay, so then the first step in learning how to do that is actually to understand what your own survival brain looks like. Now for me, I know that when I get into survival brain, if I'm going into the aggressive mode, then I think people are stupid, that they have bad intentions, that they don't mean well, that they're only doing things to hurt other people. And then whenever I go into the withdrawal phase, I just want to give up on a project, give up on the people, think that they're never going to change. So when I realize that I'm in that alarm state, the first thing I do is just to slow things down as much as possible. Because I know that my body's been activated and I have adrenaline rushing through me and I'm feeling intense feelings, and there's no way that I can just snap out of it. I have to let my emotions and my body cool down on its own. So I have to have a lot of patience for myself. I also try to scan my body and get grounded in it again. And I try to take some deep belly breaths and take control of my breathing again. And the other really important thing to do is that I try not to get mad at myself for getting into that alarm state. because I know that my alarm has only been activated because something really important to me is going on, or because I feel like something that I really care about is being threatened. And then once I do that, I try to figure out what page I'm on. And PAGE is an acronym that I just made up that I think captures the essence of how to de-escalate from an alarm state. And the first step of PAGE is to really remember what my purpose is. And by purpose, I mean my purpose in life, in the kind of life I want to live, and in the values that I uphold. And then I try to remember how this moment can be a moment when I'm trying to live my purpose in life. And then the next thing I do is try to figure out whether I'm being emotionally attuned to the other person. Because as alarms go up, then self-absorption kicks up, and I'm only worried about how this person's trying to attack me and whether I'm getting my needs and opinions across. And so this really helps me to slow down and pay attention to what's going on in the other person. And the next thing I do is to ask, what is the goal or intention of our meeting, this interaction, or even this very moment, or this conversational turn? And when you're in an alarm state, you forget what the goal is, and all you care about is self-protection. But if you remember what your goal is, then that can help you to stay focused on what you really want to accomplish and what you want to say and do. And then finally, I ask myself, what am I really feeling? And oftentimes, the only things I can understand are the anger and frustration. So I have to dig a little deeper and ask, what is the hurt or the vulnerability that I'm feeling that I really don't want to express to the other person because I'm feeling threatened? And then I try to reorient my stance to express that hurt and vulnerability and feel confident that that's the only way that I'm ever going to get anything accomplished. And what I really want to say is that being in this clear, calm, purpose-driven state of mind is incredibly difficult, and it takes hundreds and hundreds of hours of practice. I think of it like being in great cardiovascular shape if you're an athlete, because you can learn a lot of techniques for being trauma-informed, and that's like learning the actual skills of your game. But to actually be able to execute all those techniques, you have to be in great physical shape. And to do that, you have to run miles and miles every day, and you have to keep training, and you can never let that cardiovascular endurance slide, or else your game just suffers. So this is really the most foundational, most important thing that people need to learn to become a trauma-informed person, and then to help your organization become trauma-informed as well.
People will forget what you said, they will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. Your students may forget the capital of Madagascar or the formula for solving a quadratic equation, but they will never forget, even years later, how you made them feel.